bus with us. And don't let this opportunity come through and go without strengthening it and becoming part of it. So that's what I want to say. And I want to let you hear from Clyde Young, who is a long-time revolutionary leader, who has been through a tremendous amount and has a wealth of knowledge and experience, and he's going to close us out for the night.
Thank you very much. And thank all of you. It's been a joy and it's been a tremendous pleasure to be part of this bus tour that's going throughout the South. The place where slaves were brought here hundreds of years ago. Many of them dropped in the ocean, jumped in the ocean to escape from the horrors of the Middle Passage. This is the place where for hundreds of years, blacks were slaves. But that's not enough. After the Civil War, and that Civil War, in order to end that condition of slavery, would have had to been more thoroughgoing. Many more lives would have had to be lost. But after that, after a brief period, when black people tasted freedom, they tasted a little bit of it for 10 years. But then the federal troops pulled out, and slavery in a new form was reinstituted. One form of it was called Jim Crow. In other words, the legal segregation of black people here in the South. But even more than that, once again, black people found themselves working the land from can't see in the morning to can't see at night. And after that, at the end of the year, there came a day of reckoning when they had to bring their goods in. And they had to make a count with the landowner, a new slave master, and they often found themselves in debt rather than having things to support their family. Through a series of a lot of things, this form of oppression was ended. And a lot of it had to do with the people rising up and saying no more of that. But then it didn't stop. It's continued right down to the day where you have 2.4 million people confined in prison. No accident. A conscious policy on the part of the rulers to say that in the 1960s, there was a section of black people rising up and rocking this country to its foundation and drawing many other people into that struggle. People who protested against the war. People who protested against other nationalities, who protested against the conditions that they face in the country, in this rotten country called the U.S. of A. But let's go further than that. The way that they responded to that, to those just demands for freedom, that people wanted to taste freedom, how they responded was with repression. They killed people. They drove them out of the country. They put them in jail. That's what they did. And that should tell you something about the nature of this system. But not only did they do that, they built up a black middle class. When I was a kid, there wasn't a very large black middle class, but they built up a black middle class. And here you see it in Atlanta. I'm not saying that all the middle class is against the revolution. Many of them will join the revolution and be firm supporters and allies of that revolution. But there's some that I tell you, brothers and sisters, are a weight weighing down on the backs of the youth in this country and the masses of people in this country who still yearn for freedom, as they have so long. I want to tell you briefly, in order to get into the leadership question and how important it is, how decisive it is, how necessary it is if we want to get free. There was once a 17-year-old kid who spent time in reformatory. But at 17, he was considered incorrigible. And he was sent to an adult prison for 20 years for armed robbery. When that kid went in there, he was brash. He said, I'll do 10 of those years standing on my head and the other 10 years getting back on my feet. That's the spirit that he had. And at that meeting the other day, what they were trying to suppress was on the stage in the 1960s. Millions of youth across this country were on the stage. They were defying the powers. They were defying death. And they were saying and demanding, and not just saying and demanding, but the Black Panther Party went into the streets to defend people against the brutality and murder of the police. But that 17-year-old kid who vowed when he went into prison that he would just spend that time and get back out to a life of crime caught the bug. He read Malcolm X. He would have died for Malcolm X. He read Huey P. Newton. He read Bobby Seale. He respected them as leaders. But then the Panthers did one important thing. They did a lot of important things. But they turned that kid on to Mao Zedong. And the rest is history. There have been leaders in this country who stood up and defied the system and refused to bow down and led other people in rising up against this system. And I've named a few. But when that kid got out of prison, he met a leader, an outstanding leader, whose name is Bob Avakian. And that's a person who over the last 40 years has concentrated in his book's basics, has been grappling with everything between that stands between humanity and the emancipation of all humanity. He's not just for, and believe me, he has a very profound and visceral response to what has been the history of the oppression of black people. But he equally hates oppression of all kinds. And he's brought forward an understanding, and he's brought forward a line that's more advanced than any other leadership that has ever existed in this country. That's not to say he's better than anyone else that came. There's a lot of things that go into making leaders. There's accident. And there's also how they come up at any given time, what things influence them. And also some people come forward and they get killed or they die. So it's very precious when a leader of this caliber comes forward, who actually has an understanding of how this system works and what it's going to take to get out of this system. That's very precious, because it means that the people have a chance now to also see the way out of all this madness and horror, to be led. And I don't say that to mean that the people have a passive role to play. It's important for them to learn as much as they can. I tried to learn as much as I could from Malcolm X. I read every word that he ever spoke. And it's important for people to learn everything that they possibly can from Bob Avakian, because this is a leader unlike no other who's ever existed in this country. We need to have BA's works, his vision, and his revolutionary leadership known everywhere, all over this country. We need to have discussions like this. It needs to penetrate into all the schools. It needs to penetrate in the universities. It needs to go down to the base of society where people are still yearning for the freedom that I've talked about. But even more than that, not more than that, but in addition to that, in addition to BA being everywhere, imagine how that can change the society that we live in and open up possibilities. Open up a pathway for change. And this time, for fundamental change to emancipate all humanity. This is what that 17-year-old kid learned in prison. That we have to emancipate not just black people, but all humanity. And one other thing I'll say, and then I'll end. There's ways, even basic ways, for you to join this revolution. This revolution has to grow. It has to attract thousands, who now will be the leaders of millions. And it has to be part of a strategy that's been developed. See, the Black Panther Party had a lot of courage, and they had some understanding, but they did not fully understand how to take on, they did not have a strategy for defeating this beast. But we have a strategy now that's in that book, Basics, that talks about how we can get out of this madness. What are the things we need to be doing now? Not just to wait for the opportunity for revolution, but to be hastening the opportunity for revolution. And one of the most important things, or one of those things, is that this movement needs to grow. It needs to grow. It needs support from people who respect it, who love the leader, and it needs to grow among people who are becoming initiators of a new stage of revolution. So there's 12 ways in which you can join this revolution. Very basic things. I'm not going to enumerate them, but everyone should leave here with this card. Yeah. And those of you who have been touched by something and who want to get into more deeply this revolution, you need to get with us. Because this revolution needs to draw forward the thousands who are going to lead millions, and it needs to draw forward the initiators of a new stage of revolution. So I end. BA everywhere. Imagine the difference that it'll make. Thank you.